The cry in the shadows. The night sky above the ruined colony was heavy with smoke and silence, broken only by the sound of metal beams falling in the distance. What once had been a proud alien settlement was now nothing more than broken walls, cracked streets and dark alleys where shadows stretched long and cold. Among those shadows, a figure moved slowly. Her body was thin, her steps weak, yet her eyes burned with desperate fire. She was an alien mother, carrying one child in her arms while two others clung to her torn dress. Their stomachs growled with hunger, and their small voices cried softly, but she pressed forward, refusing to let despair take her. Her people had lost everything. The war had stolen their homes, their food, and their dignity. Her husband had never returned from the battlefield, and now the burden of survival rested only on her. Days had passed without proper food, only scraps of dry roots and dirty water. Her children's faces had grown pale, their eyes dull with weakness. She knew they could not last much longer. At the edge of the colony, a human supply officer walked alone, inspecting wreckage. He was not expecting company. His boots crunched against broken glass as he checked his scanner, making notes about destroyed buildings. For him, this was routine work, marking ruins, counting the damage of war, preparing reports for command. Then he heard it, a voice, broken and trembling. "Please, help us." He froze, hand moving to his weapon by instinct. His eyes darted to the shadows where the alien mother stepped forward, her head bowed low, her hands shaking as she lifted her child slightly higher. Her voice cracked as she spoke again. "My children haven't eaten," she whispered. "Please, help us, human." The officer's heart pounded. This was forbidden. Humans and her kind were enemies. The orders were clear: no aid, no mercy. Any alien still alive in these ruins was to be left behind or detained for questioning. Yet as his eyes met hers, he saw not an enemy, but a mother. Her skin was pale from hunger, her shoulders trembling under the weight of her children. The little ones looked up at him with wide, hollow eyes, too weak even to cry. For a moment he wanted to turn away. It would be easier, safer. His duty was to report her, not to help. But something inside him refused to move. His hand slipped from his weapon and he took a slow breath. "Why come to me?" he asked carefully, his voice low. "Because no one else will listen," she answered. Tears ran down her face as she held out her child, not in threat but in surrender. "If you do not help us, they will die, please. Just food, only food." The silence that followed was heavy. The officer looked around as if expecting his commander to appear and drag him away for even speaking to her. But no one was there. Only ruins, smoke, and 3 starving children watching him with hope and fear mixed together. He knew what this meant. If he gave her anything, he would be branded a traitor. If he refused, he would carry the memory of their faces forever. Slowly, he reached into his pack. His hands shook as he pulled out a ration bar. Just one. It was not much, but it was something. He held it out, his eyes fixed on the mother's trembling hands as she accepted it. The children gasped, their eyes lighting up as if the small piece of food was treasure beyond imagination. The mother broke it into pieces, giving each child a bite before taking any for herself. She whispered words of comfort in her own language, words the human could not understand, but the meaning was clear. Gratitude, relief, love. The officer's chest tightened. He had seen many things in war: explosions, blood, destruction. But nothing had struck him as deeply as this simple act of survival. When the mother looked up again, her voice was firmer, though still soft. "There are more," she said. "More children, more mothers. They hide in the old tunnels. We have nothing. Please, if you have mercy, help us." The officer's breath caught in his throat. This was no longer just about one mother and her children. This was a choice that could define him forever. If he followed her, he would be breaking every rule. If he refused, he would be walking away from dozens of starving innocents. He glanced at the shadows behind her, half expecting an ambush. Was this a trap? Was she luring him into danger? Yet the way she held her children close, the way their small hands clutched at her dress, told him this was no trick. This was desperation. The human officer stood frozen in the dark street, torn between two worlds, his orders and his conscience. And then, from the distant ruins, a low sound echoed. The groan of metal, the thump of approaching boots. Someone else was coming. The officer's hand went back to his weapon, his eyes sharp with sudden fear. The mother pulled her children closer, hiding them beneath her arms. Their eyes met one last time in that moment, and the question hung in the air like fire. Would he choose duty or humanity? The hidden hunger. The sound of heavy boots faded into the distance, leaving only the ruined streets and the faint breath of the children. The human officer's heart still raced, but when he looked back at the alien mother, he saw only her trembling form shielding her little ones. He could have walked away. He should have walked away, yet his feet moved in the opposite direction. "Show me," he whispered. The alien mother's eyes widened in surprise. For a moment she looked uncertain, as though she did not believe him. But then with a nod she guided her children closer and pointed toward the broken remains of an old transit tunnel. The officer followed carefully, his hand near his weapon. Every shadow seemed alive, every corner ready to betray him. Yet the mother's steps were steady, and her children clung silently to her sides. They entered the tunnel. The air inside was damp and stale, carrying the faint smell of mold and rust. Broken lights flickered weakly along the cracked ceiling. As they walked deeper, the officer began to hear its soft coughing, faint whispers, the restless whimper of the weak. And then he saw them. Dozens of alien children and mothers huddled together, wrapped in rags and old cloths. Their eyes were wide and hollow, their skin pale from hunger. Some reached out weak hands as they noticed the human in the dim light. Others pulled their little ones closer, afraid of what he might do. The officer's breath caught in his throat. He had seen starving prisoners before, but this was different. These were not soldiers. They were children too weak to stand, mothers too exhausted to even cry. The alien mother who had led him there spoke softly to the others in her language. The fear in their eyes softened into something else. Hope, fragile and uncertain. A young alien boy, no older than 10, staggered forward and tugged at the human's coat. His voice was barely more than a whisper. "Food?" The word cut deeper than any blade. The officer knelt, pulling another ration bar from his pack. The boy's hand shook as he accepted it. His mother rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face as she helped him take a bite. The officer looked around. His pack carried enough food for maybe 2 more people, not an entire group. The truth weighed heavily on him. Even if he gave everything, it would not be enough. The alien mother placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was gentle, not pleading but grateful. "You came," she whispered. "That is enough." But he knew it wasn't. He looked at the gaunt faces, the trembling hands, the children whose breaths came shallow as if life itself was slipping away. Something inside him broke. Orders, loyalty, the chain of command, all of it seemed distant compared to the reality before him. These were lives hanging by a thread. "Why hasn't anyone helped you?" he asked, his voice rough. The mother lowered her gaze. "Because to them we are enemies. To them our children are guilty too." The words struck like a hammer. The officer clenched his fists. He thought of his commander, of the rules drilled into him since training. Never trust the enemy, never give aid. But looking at the hollow eyes of these children, the idea of leaving them behind felt more monstrous than any enemy ever could. As he stood there, a plan began to form in his mind. Dangerous, reckless, but perhaps the only way. If he could sneak supplies from the human outpost, if he moved carefully at night, he could bring food here without anyone noticing. It would be treason. If caught, he would be court-martialed, maybe executed. But could he live with himself if he turned away now? The officer's jaw tightened. He looked at the alien mother who held her children close, waiting silently for his choice. "I'll come back," he said. Her eyes filled with tears, and she bowed her head, not in submission but in respect. "Then we will survive," she whispered. The officer turned to leave, but as he stepped toward the tunnel's exit, he noticed something. 2 glowing eyes watching from deeper within the darkness. They blinked once, then vanished into the shadows. He froze. Had someone else been listening? A survivor, a spy, or something far more dangerous? The alien mother noticed his pause and shook her head. "The tunnels are not empty," she murmured. "We are not the only ones hiding here." A chill ran down his spine. Helping them was already a risk, but now with unknown eyes in the shadows, the danger doubled. As he stepped out into the night air again, he felt the weight of his choice settle on his shoulders. He had promised to return. And he would. But with every step toward the human outpost, one thought burned in his mind. The children were starving. Time was running out and the shadows were watching. Enemies. Watching. The officer walked back to the human outpost with slow, heavy steps. Every sound of his boots against the broken stone felt too loud, as if the ruins themselves wanted to betray him. The promise he had made inside the tunnel echoed in his mind. I'll come back. But promises were dangerous in war. When he entered the perimeter, bright floodlights scanned his figure. Human soldiers at the gate nodded at him, but their eyes lingered a moment too long. He forced a casual smile, as if nothing was wrong, and showed his ID chip. The scanner beeped, green light flashing. The gate opened. Inside, the outpost buzzed with activity. Supply crates were stacked high, armored vehicles rested in long rows, and soldiers laughed around fires, roasting their rations. The smell of cooked meat filled the air, heavy and rich. For a moment, it sickened him. Only a few steps away, children were starving in the tunnels, while here men joked about wasting food to see who could burn it fastest. He clenched his fists but said nothing. He could not afford to speak. Later that night, as he sat at his desk reviewing reports, his commander entered the tent. A tall man with sharp eyes, the commander studied him for a long moment before speaking. You were late returning from your inspection. The officer's throat tightened. He forced his voice steady. Some rubble blocked the main street. Took longer to check. The commander's eyes narrowed. Keep your reports cleaner next time. We don't want surprises. The officer nodded quickly. Yes, sir. But as the commander left, the officer felt sweat on his palms. He had lied, and he knew his commander suspected something. One wrong move, one slip, and his secret would be discovered. That night, when the camp grew quiet and the fires burned low, the officer moved carefully. He slipped into the supply tent, his heart pounding with every step. Inside, rows of ration crates stood waiting. He pried one open, pulling out several bars and sealing it again. It wasn't much, but it was all he could carry without being noticed. As he left the tent, he froze. A figure stood in the shadows, watching him. Another soldier. The man's face was half hidden in the dim light, but his smirk was clear. Couldn't sleep, the soldier asked. The officer forced a laugh. Just hungry. He raised one ration bar as proof. Needed a bite. The soldier's eyes glinted. Strange, you took more than one. The officer's stomach twisted. Did he see everything? Did he know? The soldier shrugged. Be careful. Supplies are counted. People talk. With that, he walked away, leaving the officer frozen in place. By dawn, the officer was back at the ruins. He moved quickly, slipping past broken walls, heading for the tunnels. But when he entered, he felt it, the weight of eyes on him. Not just from the starving children. From deeper in the dark. He handed the food to the mothers, who received it with tears and trembling hands. The children devoured the small pieces eagerly, their faces lighting up for the first time. But while the others ate, the alien mother who had first begged him pulled him aside. You were followed, she whispered. The officer stiffened. How do you know? She pointed toward the far corner of the tunnel. We saw movement. Not one of ours. Someone else watches. The officer's mind raced. Was it the soldier from last night, or one of the glowing eyes he had seen earlier? Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed from the entrance. The children gasped, mothers pulling them close. The officer drew his weapon, aiming at the darkness. But nothing came. Only silence. The alien mother touched his arm. They are testing you. Waiting. If your people find out, we are all dead. The officer lowered his weapon slowly. He realized now that every step he took was being watched, not only by his commander, but by unseen eyes in the ruins. The tunnels were no longer just a hiding place. They were a trap of secrets where one wrong move could destroy everyone. He left the food behind, but as he stepped out into the gray daylight, he swore he heard quiet footsteps following him. The war was not over. The hunger was not the only danger, and now, enemies were watching from both sides. The breaking point. The officer could not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw hollow alien faces staring at him. Children, with ribs showing. Mothers whispering lullabies to hide the sound of hunger. But just as strong was another image, the smirk of the human soldier who had seen him near the supplies. He knew the net was closing in. At dawn, the commander's voice cut through the camp like a blade. Everyone gather. Supply counts are off. Someone has been stealing. The officer's heart dropped. Soldiers lined up as the commander's eyes swept over them. He paced slowly, like a predator searching for weakness. "We fight wars to survive," the commander growled. "Anyone who feeds the enemy feeds our own destruction. I will find the traitor." The officer kept his face still, his hands firm at his sides. But inside his mind screamed. If they checked his bag, if they searched his tent, everything would be over. Later that evening, he risked another trip to the tunnels. He knew it was reckless, but the alien mother's words haunted him. "If you do not return, we will not see another sunrise." This time he carried more food, hidden carefully under his coat. The path through the ruins felt sharper than before, every broken stone echoing his guilt. When he reached the tunnels, the children rushed to him, their weak voices rising with fragile hope. He handed out the food quickly, but his eyes never stopped scanning the shadows. The glowing eyes from before, the sense of being followed. It all pressed heavier now. Then the sound came, a heavy click, the unmistakable sound of a human rifle being cocked. Hands up, the officer spun, weapon half drawn, but froze. 3 human soldiers stood at the tunnel entrance, rifles aimed. And in front of them, his commander stepped forward, eyes burning with fury. "So it was you," the commander hissed, "helping the enemy, feeding them while our own bleed." The officer's mouth went dry. "They're not soldiers," he said, his voice low but steady. "They're children. They're starving." "They are the enemy," the commander snapped. "Their fathers killed ours, their fleets burned our homes. Mercy is weakness, and weakness kills us all." The alien mother pulled her children close, shielding them with her body. She whispered for them not to cry, though her own eyes were wide with fear. The officer raised his voice louder now, trembling with anger. "They're innocent. Look at them. Do you see warriors here? Do you see weapons? They are victims of the same war as us." But the commander's jaw hardened. He lifted his rifle. "Step aside, I'll end this." The officer's heart pounded. This was the moment, the line he could not cross without losing everything. His weapon felt heavy in his hands. If he raised it, he would be pointing it at his own people. If he didn't, the children would die before his eyes. The alien mother looked at him. Her lips trembled, but she whispered the words anyway. "If you must save them, then blame me. Tell them I tricked you. Tell them I forced you." The officer's throat closed. She was ready to sacrifice herself to protect her children and even to protect him. But he couldn't let her do that. His hand moved. Slowly at first, then with certainty. He stepped in front of the alien family, placing himself between them and the commander's rifle. "You'll have to shoot me first." The commander's eyes widened with disbelief. "You would betray your own kind? For them?" The officer's voice was firm, louder than he had ever spoken. "If protecting the innocent is betrayal, then yes." The silence that followed was like thunder. The other soldiers shifted uneasily, their rifles trembling just slightly. None of them wanted to be the one to fire. None of them wanted to kill one of their own. But the commander's eyes blazed with rage. He lifted his rifle higher. And then, a sound tore through the tunnel, a growl. Deep, guttural, echoing from the darkness. The glowing eyes returned, more of them this time, dozens. The shadows moved, revealing tall, skeletal figures that were not human, not alien, something else entirely. The officer's breath caught. The tunnels weren't empty. The starving families weren't the only ones hiding here. The commander froze, his weapon still aimed. For the first time, fear crossed his face. Humanity's choice. The tunnel air turned colder as the creatures stepped forward. Their bodies were long and twisted, their limbs bent in unnatural angles, and their glowing eyes shone like embers in the dark. The starving alien children whimpered, pulling back against the walls while their mothers clutched them tightly. Even the human soldiers lowered their rifles in shock. None of them had ever seen creatures like this. The commander's voice broke the silence. "What are they?" The alien mother's face was pale. "Scavengers," she whispered. "They came when the war left these tunnels empty. They eat the dead, and when food is gone, they eat the living." The commander cursed under his breath, but his rifle trembled slightly. He had faced enemy fleets, burning skies, and endless war, but not this. The officer stood frozen, his mind racing. He had sworn to protect the alien children, but now their lives were trapped between two threats: the commander ready to execute them, and the creatures closing in for the kill. One of the scavengers let out a hiss, sharp and high, before leaping forward. The officer's instincts kicked in. He fired. The shot echoed, the creature fell, and the tunnel erupted in chaos. The scavengers charged. The officer shouted, "Protect the children!" And without thinking, he and the alien mother pulled them behind a broken wall. The other human soldiers fired wildly, their rifles spitting fire into the dark. The commander barked orders, but fear cracked his voice. The officer moved fast, shooting down another creature, then slamming his rifle into a third. Beside him, the alien mother grabbed a piece of broken pipe and struck at a scavenger that lunged too close. Her courage was raw and desperate, the strength of a mother with nothing left to lose. The battle was short but brutal. By the time the last scavenger screeched and fell silent, the tunnel floor was slick with blood and the air thick with smoke. The soldiers lowered their rifles, breathing hard. No one spoke. The officer's ears rang with silence, broken only by the whimpering of frightened children. Slowly, the commander stepped forward. His rifle was still in his hands, but his eyes were different now. He had seen the alien mothers fighting with nothing but scraps, protecting their children against monsters worse than war. He had seen his own men hesitate, unsure if they were soldiers or murderers. He looked at the officer, who stood protectively in front of the children. His weapon still raised, but his hand steady. "You disobeyed me," the commander said, his voice low. "You broke every rule we swore to follow." The officer met his gaze without fear. "I chose humanity," he answered. "Not sides, humanity." The silence stretched. Soldiers shifted uneasily, waiting for the commander's verdict. Would he shoot his own man here? Would he order the children killed anyway? Then the commander's eyes moved to the alien mother. Her dress was torn, her arms bleeding, yet she held her children close with fierce determination. He saw not an enemy, but a parent like any on earth. Finally, he lowered his rifle. "No one will speak of this," he said quietly. "No reports. No records. These tunnels never existed." The soldiers exchanged glances, confused but relieved. The commander's jaw tightened. "If anyone asks, the supplies were destroyed in the attack. The creatures took them." "Understood." One by one, the soldiers nodded. The officer felt his chest loosen, the weight of death lifting for the first time. The alien mother looked at him, tears in her eyes. She whispered softly, "You gave us more than food. You gave us a chance." The officer turned to his commander, still uncertain. "Why?" The commander's eyes were hard, but something in them had shifted. "Because mercy is dangerous. But sometimes, it is the only thing that makes us worth saving." The officer said nothing. He simply looked back at the alien children, their eyes now alive with fragile hope. For the first time since the war began, he felt that maybe the stars held more than hatred and fire. As the humans left the tunnels, the alien families remained hidden, clutching the small supplies that would carry them through another week. The officer knew he could not end their suffering with one act. But he also knew that compassion had changed something bigger than orders, bigger than war. Perhaps one day humanity and their enemies would remember this moment, when one soldier chose to protect children instead of destroy them. And as he stepped into the pale light of morning, the officer whispered to himself, "Sometimes, the strongest weapon we bring to the stars is not our fleets, but our hearts."